I think you guys are going to love this. So I made a 9/11 iceberg because I've been trying to think of the best way to format this with it being such a vast topic with so many different theories and opinions and it being connected to so many different topics and conspiracies out there that I figured the best way to do it would be iceberg format with the most simple, accepted mainstream narratives being first and then going all the way down to the abyss and going to the absolute deepest, darkest theories out there. So I'm going to tell you at the end which one I side with the most. And next week, I'm going to make a thorough deep dive video on that specific theory of it. I know a lot of you guys are going to be at different levels of this. Some of you guys have already heard the mainstream stuff. Some of you guys have never heard anything past the mainstream stuff. So I'm splitting it into chapters so you guys could skip ahead based on your expertise levels. And by the way, I'm putting this PDF of the iceberg in my book club, which is linked in the description in the comment section, also QR code right here. So if you want the PDF, jump into the book club. But without further ado, let's get right into it. So tip of the iceberg, mainstream facts in the official narrative. 19 hijackers carried out the attack. The 9/11 Commission identified 19 al-Qaeda operatives who hijacked 4 planes. Flight manifests listed their names. Security footage captured hijackers boarding the flights. Passports and IDs were recovered at crash sites in perfect condition. Al-Qaeda training documents linked several of them to terror camps in Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda were responsible. Bin Laden publicly claimed responsibility in multiple videos. Al-Qaeda had already attacked U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998. The FBI and the CIA had tracked bin Laden for years as the head of a terrorist network. The 9/11 Commission cited intercepted communications, planning meetings, and funding links tying Al-Qaeda to the attacks. Planes hit the Twin Towers in Pentagon. Physical evidence and eyewitnesses support the plane strikes. Thousands witnessed it either in person or over video. Plane wreckage, engines, and landing gear were found at all 4 crash sites. Black box recorders were recovered from Flight 93 and partially from others. Over 80 Pentagon witnesses reported seeing a plane. World Trade Center collapsed due to a fire. Now, if you don't remember this one, this is the one that did not get hit by a plane, just free fell out of nowhere, and they say because of a fire. Fires burned uncontrolled for 7 hours due to water supply issues. World Trade Center 7's unique design included long, unsupported spans that failed when heated. No evidence of explosives was found in debris by FEMA and NIST. The 9/11 Commission reports. So, a bipartisan panel conducted a 20-month investigation, included interviews with over 1,200 people in 10 countries, reviewed 2.5 million pages of documents, produced recommendations for intelligence and reform and aviation security, acknowledged failures but attributed the attacks to Al-Qaeda. TSA and Homeland Security were formed afterwards. U.S. vulnerabilities prompted a security overhaul like the Patriot Act. TSA was created in November 2001 to federalize airport security. Department of Homeland Security was formed in 2002 by consolidating 22 agencies like FEMA, Coast Guard, Secret Service, etc. into one, aimed to coordinate intelligence sharing and response to terrorism. So this is when the CIA and FBI also started sharing information and being more centralized. And the war on terror begins. So the U.S. declared global war on terrorism following the attacks. Invasion of Afghanistan, October 2001, targeted the Taliban for sheltering Al-Qaeda. So 1 month after, we got right into it. The U.S. Patriot Act expanded surveillance and counterterrorism powers. Iraq invasion 2003 was justified partly by alleged terror links and WMDs. All right, that's the end of tier 1. Now we're getting into the shallow waters, past the tip of the iceberg. So these are the type of theories that highlight gaps or oddities in the official narrative, sparking mild skepticism. So I'd say this is probably where the majority of people are at. Think of it like a bell curve where I'd say very few people are in the camp of the stuff, believing the stuff that I just read. This one, I'd say more people are in this camp. So NORAD's response time delays. Critics question why NORAD failed to intercept any hijacked planes despite standard protocols. NORAD had procedures for intercepting off-course or unresponsive aircrafts. FAA did not notify NORAD about some flights until after crashes occurred. Exercises and communication breakdowns delayed response. The 9/11 Commission noted confusion between FAA and NORAD led to ineffective coordination. Isn't that a shame when that happens? President George Bush reading The Pet Goat in the classroom during the attack. So Bush continued reading to school children for 7 minutes after being told America is under attack. Critics argue his inaction was suspicious or indicated foreknowledge. Supporters say he stayed calm to avoid panicking the children. Yes, because it's more important to keep the children calm than to start addressing the nation that is under attack. And by the way, this is not even close to the craziest thing of what happened in this classroom that day. Wait till you see what I show you, because what I'm going to show you later does not belong in this section. It's actually like probably all the way at the bottom of this entire iceberg, what happened in this classroom classroom. It is freaky. So the CIA tracked some hijackers pre 9/11. CIA reportedly tracked Nawaf al-Hazimi and Khalid al-Mihdhar, but failed to notify the FBI. These men attended a meeting in Malaysia in 2000 flagged by the CIA. They entered the US using real names but were not monitored. Congressional investigations criticized this intelligence failure. Next, Saudi Arabia's possible links to hijackers. 15 out of the 19 hijackers were Saudi, and alleged financial links to Saudi officials exist. 28 pages of a congressional report were declassified in 2016 showing indirect connections, but you never heard a peep about Saudi Arabia in any way, shape, or form, or being a place that we needed to go into and invade. Weird. Allegations include Saudi officials helping hijackers with lodging and logistics. Again, no word about Saudi after it was all Iraq, all Afghanistan. 9/11 families sued Saudi Arabia under the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act. Next, Larry Silverstein's insurance claim. I'm sure a lot of you heard this, but Larry Silverstein took over the World Trade Center lease in July of 2001. What's that, about 2 months, 3 months before this happened? And he insured it specifically against terrorism. And he bought the building for about $1.5 billion, but after 9/11, he pursued 2 separate insurance claims, one per plane, winning $4.5 billion. So he made $3 billion. It's the biggest insurance claim ever paid out in the history of insurance settlements. Critics call this suspicious, but defenders say it was a standard business risk management. The case went through years of litigation before settlement. Then next, the famous pull it comment, pull it. So in the PBS documentary, Silverstein said, quote, "I remember getting a call. I said, we've had such a terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it." So conspiracy theorists interpret pull it as a demolition lingo. Silverstein later said he meant pull out of firefighter operations, but no demolition evidence was found in the NIST report. And by the way, NIST stands for National Institute of Standards and Technology. But you'll see later why Building 7 is very weird and really defies the laws of physics. And we're definitely going to get into that. So last in this tier, the Pentagon surveillance footage controversy. So only limited blurry footage of the Pentagon impact was released. Really just one camera angle, and you can't see what it is. Like, it doesn't clearly look like a plane, not from that angle. Now, the weird thing is that the FBI reportedly confiscated over 85 video recordings from surrounding businesses. Footage from Citgo gas station and Doubletree Hotel were released years later, but show very little, don't clearly show a plane. And then a few frames from the Pentagon cameras show an explosion, but no clear image of a plane. But we'll address that later. All right, now we are getting deeper. We are in the middle of the iceberg. And these are the widely discussed theories that challenge the official story with alternative explanations. So the last one was just pointing out weird things. This one's actually making a claim. So some people say it was a controlled demolition of World Trade Center Tower 1, 2, and 7. The reason is the symmetrical free fall like collapse of the towers, and they say it resembles a controlled demolition. Architects and engineers for 9/11 truth cite speed, symmetry, and molten steel as red flags. And the weird thing about it is that steel melts at 2,500 degrees, but the hottest that jet fuel and fire could have possibly gotten, according to engineers and architects and scientists, is 1,800 degrees. So how do you get pools of molten steel when it's scientifically not hot enough to melt steel? Well, that goes into the next thing. So thermite or nanomite residue in the debris. So some independent researchers reported traces of thermite compounds in the World Trade Center dust. A 2009 paper by Harriet et al. Claims to find active thermite material, and thermite is a military-grade explosive. But no government investigation confirmed this, only independent researchers. And skeptics question the peer review integrity of the paper and the lab controls. Next, some people say that Flight 93, the flight that was on its way to the White House, was shot down. This is the flight that went down in Pennsylvania.
United States in New York shot down the plane over Pennsylvania and attacked the Pentagon.
Flight 93 debris were scattered over miles. Some witnesses reported hearing a missile or an explosion. The official narrative is that the plane crashed due to a passenger revolt. Some debris, like engine parts, passport fragments, were found miles away from the impact crater. The impact crater, or site of impact, was heavily guarded. Nobody was allowed in. The press wasn't allowed in. And there weren't a whole lot of plane parts in that particular spot. And so why was it so heavily guarded? Now, of course, the 9/11 Commission ruled out a shoot down, but records of Cheney's orders remain controversial. Next, the Project for a New American Century, PNAC, the famous "We need a new Pearl Harbor" quote. So this Project for a New American Century was a white paper that was created by Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, and John Bolton and Richard Pearl. And it basically was advocating for the need to invade Iraq, overthrow Saddam Hussein, and really expand our reach in the Middle East, and also control our domestic surveillance programs. But they said, absent a catalyzing event like New Pearl Harbor, we just won't be able to do this. This was in 1997 that they wrote this report, and in 2001 they got their new Pearl Harbor and got everything that was on their wish list from this white paper. Now, critics argue that the language implies a desire for or exploitation of a terror event. Quote is from a Rebuilding America's Defenses Policy white paper. Next, the insider trading before 9/11. There was an unusual spike in put options for United and American Airlines that occurred days before the attack. So if you're unfamiliar with the stock market, a put option is basically a bet that stocks can go down. A call option is a bet that the stocks can go up. And a normal ratio for puts to calls is 1-to-1, but the ratio was way out of whack for United Airlines. It was 12-to-1 for put calls, and then for American Airlines it was 6-to-1. This is confirmed by all sorts of investigations. This is very mainstream, even though it's a very dark theory and dark evidence. And makes it even darker is that according to multiple financial investigations, including CBS News and Bloomberg reports, that they say that up to 95% of the put options purchased before 9/11 was placed through a single U.S. brokerage. Allegedly, Alex Brown, which was a subsidiary of Deutsche Bank at the time and run by a man named Buzzy Krongard, who later became the executive director of the CIA. That's a little bit strange, just a little bit. And there was an abnormal amount of call options put on Raytheon, which was reportedly the only stock that was positive that day, and obviously had a very successful year going forward that year. Next, the Mossad foreknowledge, the Israeli art students and dancing Israelis. So multiple reports suggest Israeli nationals were surveilling hijackers or celebrating the attack. 5 Israelis were arrested after being seen filming and celebrating the World Trade Center collapse. They were deported weeks after the interrogation, but a DEA memo warned of Israeli art students allegedly conducting surveillance in the U.S. So I don't believe there's any footage of this, but multiple reports say that they were seen dancing, celebrating on top of a building, watching and filming the downing of the towers. Next, this one is bizarre. So there were literally war games simulating the exact thing that happened with they were simulating the hijacking of a plane by terrorists and attacking buildings. So I looked it up. This type of drill, this type of exercise is done once, maybe twice per year, and they were being done this day. So it was unclear when the attacks were happening. They were saying like, hey, is this real life or is this drill? So as reports of what was happening with the World Trade Center being attacked was being communicated to these guys, they're like, wait, is this part of the drill? Because this is literally what we're drilling for right now. So what are the odds that the one day that you're simulating this event, this is a once a year thing, the same thing is happening, causing all kinds of confusion? Probably led to that slow response by NORAD. The exercise literally included scenarios of planes being hijacked and crashed into buildings. And they say NORAD's response might have been delayed by phantom radar blips from the simulations. Now, obviously, the skeptical people say that these drills provided a cover or plausible confusion for a real attack. I'd say it makes it look all the more suspicious. Like, I'd literally be less suspicious if they just had a slow response because of a technology breakdown, communication breakdown, you name it. But to have this simulation that happens once a year on that day, that is strange. Next tier, we are officially in the deep water. This is for the professionals. All right, so these theories allege deliberate cover-ups or complicity by powerful entities. Introducing Operation Able Danger, identifying Atta before 9/11. So a Pentagon data mining operation allegedly tracked hijacker Mohammed Atta in the year 2000. So Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer testified Able Danger identified Atta and 3 other hijackers 1 year before the attacks. He claimed that higher-ups ordered the intel to be destroyed or suppressed due to legal concerns about spying on people in the United States. The 9/11 Commission reportedly ignored Able Danger testimony, later calling it, quote, not historically reliable. And some say that Pentagon and government lawyers fought vigorously to have this thrown out of court. Next, CIA and ISI funding links to Mohammed Atta. So Indian intelligence sources and some media reports claimed that the head of Pakistan's ISI wired $100,000 to Atta. General Mahmoud, General General Mahmoud Ahmed, then ISI chief, was in Washington on 9/11 meeting top U.S. officials. Reports in Times of India and AFP linked him to the transfer via Omar Saeed Sheikh, a known terror financier. The 9/11 Commission acknowledged the payment but omitted ISI connections in its final intel report. Next, Daddy George Bush was at a Carlisle event on 9/11 with Osama bin Laden's brother. I mean, that is freaking bizarre. How the hell do you explain that? And then, if that's not weird enough to you, flights were grounded for several days or weeks after the attack. And then the first flights that were allowed to take off and leave the country escorted members, I think over 20 members of Osama bin Laden's direct family out of the country on government flights. They were the first ones to leave. So what is that? He's the most wanted man in the world, enemy number one of the United States. Supposedly we're spending these trillions of dollars to go on a manhunt for him, and you're escorting his family out of the country first class, like it's a priority. What is that? Next, PTEC software and FAA vulnerabilities. So PTEC is a company with Saudi ties, had access to FAA and NORAD systems prior to 9/11. PTEC supplied risk management softwares used in sensitive military and government systems. FBI investigated its alleged links to terror financiers like Yassin al-Qadi, a designated terrorist. Critics argue that this software access could have been used to manipulate radar or disable responses. That's weird to use Saudi software to control and monitor FAA and NORAD data. Why? Next, explosions in the basement before the plane impact. So multiple witnesses reported explosions in the World Trade Center basements moments before the planes hit. William Rodriguez, a janitor and 9/11 survivor, described massive blasts below ground level. Other workers in sublevels reported people burned or injured by unknown explosions. These accounts conflict with the plane-only impact theory and suggest possible pre-planted charges. And firefighters reported bombs in the building, so dozens of first responders described hearing multiple secondary explosions in the towers. New York Fire Department oral histories released in 2005 contain repeated mentions of bombs going off in the building. Many witnesses noted popping sounds or explosions on lower floors before the collapse. The NIST attributed these to structural failures and elevator shaft pressure releases. I don't know about you, but I'm not feeling too good of a vibe from this government agency called NIST. Next, 9/11 whistleblowers being ignored or silenced. So several individuals with relevant intel say their warnings were suppressed before and after 9/11. For example, Colleen Rowley, FBI, Harry Smith flagged Zakari's suspicious activities before, but they were brushed off. FAA whistleblower Bogdan Jakovich said red flags were ignored and post-9/11 investigations were superficial. Many whistleblowers faced retaliation, gag orders, or media dismissal. Next, Sybil Edmonds' testimony about pre-9/11 intel. Former FBI translator Sybil Edmonds claimed the Bureau had intel of an impending attack. She said high-level U.S. officials were aware of foreign operatives discussing attacks months before 9/11. Edmonds was gagged under the state secrets privilege, one of the only times it's been used in such a way. Her claims implicated figures in illegal arms trafficking and obstruction of justice. Next, the suspicious activities of the Saudis, who were the ones who ended up hijacking the plane. Allegedly, when they were being trained, they were only interested in learning how to take off, but not learning how to land. Next, Marvin Bush and World Trade Center security contracts. So Marvin P. Bush, brother of George W. Bush, was on the board of Securicom, later Stratesec, which provided security for the World Trade Center. Securicom handled electronic security at the World Trade Center, Dulles Airport, and United Airlines, three key 9/11 locations. Their contract allegedly ended just weeks before the attacks, and the company had ties to Kuwaiti investors and former military figures. That's definitely one worth taking a deeper look at. By the way, in the comments, let me know which one of these you would like me to do a deep dive on. I know one for sure, but you let me know which one you think is worth investigating further. We have officially entered the abyss. These are what they would call far-fetched theories, maybe too crazy sounding for anybody to believe because they might stretch beyond mainstream evidence and enter the realm of wild conjecture. But with such suppression of people who would know things about this, I don't think you could put a limit on how far-fetched we get with this. So there's the no planes theory, that it was fake video like CGI, that was a missile that hit the Pentagon, which I do kind of lean in that camp that it might have been a missile that hit the Pentagon, because they've done the breakdowns of how hard it would be for the plane to get that low and hit it at that angle, and the lack of video evidence and where it hit in the Pentagon in particular. We'll get to that in a second. Yeah, it seemed very precise, and you don't confiscate 85 cameras that were nearby that could have captured what happened if it's a clear-cut, case closed situation. Like, I'm sure they would love for people to stop asking about whether or not it was a missile, if it definitely wasn't a missile. So if you could prove it, I think they would prove it. But some people go as far as to say they believe no planes were used and that the TV footage was doctored in real time. They argue that the footage shows inconsistencies in physics, like a plane melting into the tower without any resistance, which is interesting because our president, Mr. Trump, I'll show you a clip right here. He says that these buildings were literally built to withstand a 747 impact.
Donald, you're probably the best known builder, particularly of great buildings in the city. There's a great deal of question about whether or not the damage and the ultimate destruction of the buildings was caused by the airplanes, by architectural defect, or possibly by bombs or aftershocks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it was an architectural defect. You know, the World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation, and it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid and half of the columns were blown out. I mean, so this was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows you had the steel on the outside. So you had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams, when I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. And this is steel that was, you remember the width of the windows in the World Trade Center, folks. I think you know, if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747, or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have, and it was almost just like a can of soup.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2, and when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think, obviously, they were very big planes. They were going very rapidly because I was also watching where the plane seemed to be not only going fast, it seemed to be coming down into the building. So it was getting the speed from going downhill, so to speak. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid, and you know, it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
They have steel beams on the outside of the building, which is very strong, so it does look a little bit strange. And the highest levels of government probably did have the ability to use CGI and doctor footage far before we knew they were capable of doing it. But I'm not all the way there on that one yet. Let me know if you are. I'd say I'm at about 20% for that one. But for the Pentagon, I'm at like 80-90% that was a missile. At the Pentagon, theorists claim that the entry hole was too small for a Boeing 747. They cite lack of large plane debris in the photos, and opponents note dozens of eyewitnesses saw planes and that wreckage was found inside all the crash sites. Was it? Stand by. Some people say that holograms used in place of real aircrafts. Now, I mean, you ever see the videos of like China where they have those hologram dragons and stuff like that? Like, it's pretty crazy what they could do. Now, this is 23 years ago, 22 years ago. Yeah, 23 years ago. I think it's possible they could have had that type of technology back then, but that's a crazy one. Like, I mean, there are very few camera angles, but that's the thing, though. You do get reports of people's phones being confiscated and cameras being confiscated, and there wasn't really a whole lot of cell phone recording devices back then, like maybe camcorders, but I don't know, that's a wild one. So people who say this suggest that advanced holographic technology projected fake planes to create the illusion of an airliner strike based on perceived visual glitches in news broadcasts and timing inconsistencies. And you know, it is interesting how, like, if you look at the plane hits one side and the explosion comes out the other side.
Not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
Oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
Dear
Has
Lord.
I
just
did not
hit.
see a plane go in. That just exploded.
We just saw another plane coming in from the side.
You did. That was out of absolute
Yes,
by
and
my
that's
view.
the second explosion. You could see the plane come in just from the right-hand side of the screen. So this looks like it is some sort of a concerted effort to attack.
Now, I'm not an explosives expert, but it is a little bit weird looking. Some people say this is tied to Project Bluebeam, which believes a supposed secret NASA plan to use holograms for global deception, which Project Bluebeam is a real thing, and it's exactly what it says. Like, some people say they're going to use it to fake an alien invasion. Some people say they're going to use it to fake the second coming of Jesus. So that's not one to discard too quickly. Now, the mainstream, of course, says there's zero credible evidence to support the existence of such hologram tech at the level in 2001. But if that's your only argument, I would say that they probably did have that tech because everybody says, whatever technology we're seeing, the government's 30 years ahead of us. And look at what, like, Singapore, South Korea, China, look at what they're able to do. I don't know why we don't do it in America, but look at, like, here, I'm showing you right now, like, look at this dragon, look at these holograms are able to show. So we might have had the technology to do this back then. Not saying that is what happened, but I'm saying we probably did have the technology to make a hologram that looked like that. That's an eerie thought, though. Like, that creates all kinds of questions. Next, this one I think is the most interesting, and this is the one I'm going to do a deep dive on next week, because my buddy in the book club, my buddy Andrew, just brought this to my attention a couple weeks ago, and I've been really obsessed with it since. Never heard this before he brought it up to me, but there's this woman named Dr. Judy Wood, and just to give you a quick little glimpse at her resume, like, she has nothing to do with this in terms of, like, she's not a conspiracy theorist. This is a lady who has a civil engineering degree, a master's in engineering mechanics, and a master's degree in applied physics, and she's a PhD in materials engineering science. So civil engineering, engineering mechanics, applied physics, and a PhD in materials engineering science. So this is what she says about this. She says the buildings did not collapse. They unraveled like a sweater. Quote, if you listen to the evidence carefully enough, it will speak to you and tell you exactly what happened. If you don't know what happened, keep listening until you do. The evidence always tells the truth. The key is not to allow yourself to be distracted away from seeing what the evidence is telling you. Empirical evidence is the truth that theory must mimic. And see, I'm getting chills from this one, because this one is really, really, really crazy, because it's solid. What she's saying is very solid. Like, I'll read you a couple of the crazier ones that she says, but I'm going to save the majority of it for the deep dive next week. So for one thing, she points out that the buildings collapsed way too fast. Like when you have a nearly half a mile tall building, there's going to be resistance, like, from all the floors that are under it. But she says the buildings collapsed in a matter of 10 seconds. So that's literally, if you dropped like a pool table ball from the height of where the building was, it would take 10 seconds with no resistance. So that's how fast the buildings fell. But it should have taken like 90 seconds for them to fall with the amount of resistance that should have been there from every single floor. But they just, like, melt away. And she points out that the debris of the building was only about 2% of the building's original height. But based on other demolitions that she looked at and studied, it should have been at least 12 to 15% of the original height of the building. And she says she uses this term called dustification to describe how steel beams and concrete seemingly disintegrated into, like, ultrafine dust before even hitting the ground, which she says cannot be explained by fire, explosives, or gravitational collapse. So you see all that dust coming out, like, this entire time? She's saying that that's literally, like, the metal and the steel being extracted from the building because of directed energy weapons. And the samples from this evidence are, like, defy normal things that we've seen in every possible way. So she said the dust contained particles smaller than DNA. That air samples revealed aerosols of 0.09 to 0.26 microns in size, which is smaller than red blood cells, and that these particles included glass, sulfuric acid, carcinogenic organics, and metals, and detected at levels higher than any site ever recorded worldwide. Here's a crazy one. So people who were, like, in the middle of the building before it collapsed, they reported seeing sunshine, like, looking up. So they described the moment. This man named Jonas described the moment he looked up from inside the North Tower stairwell and saw sunlight, stating, there used to be 106 floors above us. Now I'm seeing sunshine. implying that the entire structure above them had vanished without crushing them. And then there were these weird holes. Here, I'll show you a picture that were like symmetrically perfect, and they cut deep through multiple floors with no conventional explanation, like falling debris or explosives matching their formation. So here's one. So the Liberty Street hole was so deep and sharply defined that only the tip of a steel beam was visible inside, with the beam's metal looking cooked or unfolded, raising questions about extreme non-conventional heat or energy. Now, some vertical holes resembled core samples taken from soil, implying a precision cutting method or beam-like weapon, since horizontal damage was minimal. Now, nearby buildings like World Trade Center Tower 3 and 4 were either vanished completely or were nearly half missing, but adjacent buildings above 20th floor showed barely any damage despite being across from 110-story collapses. Judy Wood suggests this indicates upper floors were pulverized midair into talcum-like dust rather than crashing down. Then you have the toasted cars. So cars spontaneously combusted. Some vehicles were reported to have exploded into flames without any clear source of ignition. Witnesses described them as catching fire without explanation, while paper sitting right next to them remained unburned. In Maui, there are reports of the same thing happening there. So something that could turn metal into butter without affecting paper. That's not something we know about. So there were melted interiors and untouched exteriors, so several cars appeared to have burned from the inside but not on the outside, defying normal fire behavior. 1,400 plus vehicles damaged in bizarre ways, vehicles located as far as 7 blocks from ground zero, showing inexplicable damage like missing door handles, warped window frames, and melted engine blocks, but other nearby materials remained intact. There's this New York Police Department police car that total anomaly. So this police car was half in pristine condition and half completely toasted, so obviously suggesting very selective energy application. Some vehicles were flipped upside down without major crushing, and plastics for the most part survived, like plastic light bars, but metal was pulverized. Then steel beams were thinned like tissue paper and curled up like a tortilla chip or like a ribbon. Scientists found eutectic formations on steel, unexpected chemical changes where iron and sulfur combined to create new compounds indicating unexplained high temperature or chemical activity. The New York Times called this, quote, perhaps the deepest mystery uncovered in the investigation. So the foundational chemical components of steel was changed. So I know we went on a little bit of a tangent there, but that's about 5 or 10% of the facts and arguments that Judy Wood makes. And you're going to get the rest of that a little bit later this week, because I think this has the most evidence behind it. And I think this needs to be looked at the most. But let's get back to the iceberg, because we got to get it all out. And there's still a lot of crazy stuff that I haven't shown you yet. Oh, and not to mention that 40% of the bodies of the people who died that day were either never uncovered or never identified. Like, that doesn't even happen in war most of the time. So how do you explain that? Over 1,000 people never found or never identified. Now, the critics of that say no direct evidence of a directed energy source has ever surfaced. I mean, like, why would it? Or what do you call what I just said if there's no evidence of it? Yes, psychos. Next, nuclear charges in the building core. So there are claims that many nukes or underground nuclear devices were used to vaporize the tower's cores. Theories cite seismic readings, melted steel, and high temperatures as evidence. Some claim radiation levels at ground zero were unusually high. Not confirmed by any official agency, but I don't really put a lot of weight in what the official agencies say. So the DOE and the EPA conducted environmental testing, and they say no nuclear residue consistent with weapons was found. Interesting. Now, how about this one? There was actually a freaking hurricane, like a Category 3 hurricane, Hurricane Aaron, off the coast of New York that day. Now look at the route this thing takes. Now first it's going towards like Florida, the Caribbean area, hooks a mean right, goes up, takes a beeline for New York. This thing is like touching Cape Cod on the day of 9/11. The news isn't talking about it. Look at this clip. And then on 9/11, just hooks a right. It's going on a beeline to New York, then boop. So if you're controlling a freaking hurricane with a joystick and making it do what you want, this is what it would look like. Now, that raises a whole lot of questions that we'll get into in the next episode about why a hurricane off the coast would be advantageous and what it means that the media was just not talking about like it's a perfectly sunny day, when just days and weeks before that they were talking about a hurricane coming towards New York. Next, 9/11 was a ritual sacrifice or a cult event So theorists interpret 9/11 as a mass ritual conducted by secret societies like Freemasons or the Illuminati. They point to symbolism, twin towers as pillars, boas and Jachin, the date 9/11, and occult numerology. Some believe the timing, visuals, and language used during the event align with esoteric rites. Now, they say there's no evidence of this one, but remember what I told you about the classroom with George Bush? Look at what words these kids are reading off the board as the attacks on the Twin Towers are happening.
Get ready to read all these words on this page without making a mistake. Look at the letter at the end and remember the sound it makes. Get ready. Kite. Yes, kite. Get ready to read this word the fast way. Get ready. Kid. Yes, kid. Sound it out. Get ready. Kid. Sound it out. Get ready. Kid. What word? Kid. Yes, kid. Boys and girls, sound this word out. Get ready. Steel. What word? Steel. Yes, steel. Read these words the fast way. Get ready. Playing. Yes, playing. Get ready. Must. Yes, must. Let's read these words the fast way without making a mistake. Get ready. Kite. Yes, kite. Get ready. Kit. Yes, kit. Get ready. Steel. Yes, steel. Get ready. Plane. Yes, plane. Get ready. Must. Yes, must. Open your book up to lesson 60 on page 153.
I am getting chills right now. Like, I've seen this a bunch before, but this is like a satanic ritual. You know, they say God answers the prayers of children first. So I believe that, you know, children, they have some power spiritually to make things happen with prayer, whether it's good or bad. But this almost feels like some sort of like way to manipulate them and to like use the power of children to make sure this thing happen. I mean, you cannot convince me this is a coincidence. Like, you're describing the event that's happening in a classroom that the president's in with 5 and 6 year olds. This is one of the creepiest things at all. And I would probably write off or not give a lot of mind to the whole occult ritual sacrifice, mass sacrifice thing. When I saw this makes me do a double take on that one. Next, controlled demolition to destroy evidence. So the World Trade Center Tower 7 housed offices for the SEC, Secret Service, IRS, and other agencies that were all getting ready to digitalize their auditing systems instead of keeping it on paper. Now, the SEC admitted that thousands of documents related to Enron and WorldCom investigations were lost in the collapse, and also lots of documents in relation to the Pentagon. And you remember what Mr. Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said the day before 9/11 on 9/10, came out and said, yeah, U.S. government cannot account for $2.3 trillion. And the exact department in the Pentagon that was investigating that missing $2.3 trillion is the department that got hit by a plane or a missile, and it destroyed everything, killed everybody that was looking into it. Now, what Catherine Austin Fitts says about this is very interesting. She says that in 1995, when there was a government shutdown, that the Republicans were trying to reel in the spending, they ended up not getting their way, and some accounting laws changed to where the government can actually spend money without Congress knowing about, without the people knowing about it, without it being necessarily approved. Then there became this giant black hole of missing money. It was 2.3 trillion in 2001. Today it's over 35 trillion. And I'm not talking about the national debt number. I'm talking about the amount of money the government cannot account for. So this is a very dark thing right here, and I think it's very relevant to this topic. Catherine Austin Fitts says they gave up on America in the 90s and started stealing this money from pension funds. But that's a whole another rabbit hole. Let me know if you want to know more on that. I also made an episode about this. Now, of course, NIST attributes the collapse of Building 7 to fires and say that no explosives were found in the testings. Next, black budget operations with remote control planes. This suggests that planes were unmanned or remotely hijacked using classified military tech, cites patents for remote flight systems and Boeing's uninterruptible autopilot. Claims include possible switching of Flight 77 with a drone or a missile. I could buy that. I could definitely buy that. And they say no credible evidence shows this happened, but the existence of the tech definitely adds some intriguing elements to it, because that is a fact that that tech does exist. Next, 9/11 predicted in pop culture media for decades. So dozens of pre-2001 media pieces allegedly foreshadowed 9/11. Examples: The Simpsons episode magazine cover with 9 and Twin Towers forming an 11. The Matrix, Neo's ID expires on 9/11/2001. The Lone Gunman Pilot, Fox show about a plane being flown into the World Trade Center by remote control. Now, that's just a few of many examples. I'm getting the chills right now. And believers say that this reflects predictive programming conditioning the public to accept future trauma. Skeptics view it as coincidental pattern recognition. Just don't pay attention to it, idiot minions. We're at the bottom of the iceberg, so there's another level to this. Reptilian elites or non-human entities were behind 9/11. David Icke and others claim global events are orchestrated by shape-shifting reptilian overlords. Believers say that 9/11 was a ritual or energy harvest orchestrated by non-human elites. I mean, I definitely believe it could have been orchestrated by human elites, so not the craziest thing to think if there were non-human elites that they could be behind this. Mass sacrifice, maybe. They interpret certain politicians' facial features or body language as evidence of reptilian traits. I could see that. But no physical or photographic proof exists, purely symbolic or mythological. Next, Stargate portal opened at Ground Zero. Some claim the destruction of the Twin Towers triggered a dimensional rupture. Proponents say that the tower's design and destruction symbolized a gateway between worlds. Ties into theories about ley lines, energy grids, and ancient Babylonian mysticism. Some link this with a sudden shift in global consciousness or an unseen reset of reality. We definitely entered a new freaking world when that happened. Like, just with the Patriot Act alone, the War on Terror, whole new world. And I was 6 years old when this happened, so I don't know anything else, unfortunately, but I always hear people say about how great the 90s were. If you're like a teenager in your 20s in the 90s, I hear people say how great the 80s were. You even hear people say how great the 60s and 70s were. Shit, even the 50s. But I wouldn't know. I would not know. But it sounds different. Next, towers as symbolic twin pillars in a Masonic ritual. Now, Freemasonry includes two key symbols, Boaz and Jacqueline, the twin pillars of Solomon's temple. The twin towers are seen as real-world representations of these esoteric symbols. The act of bringing them down is interpreted as an occult sacrifice or the start of a new world order. Freemasonry historical ties to architectural and symbolism fuel the theory, though no direct link is shown. Next, they say 9/11 could have been used to alter timelines or reality, as some believe 9/11 marked the point where humanity entered a different timeline or dimension. So this is tied to the Mandela effect, like a collective misremembering of the Bernstein or Bernstein bears. Believers think something was changed at a metaphysical level. Reality glitches began after 9/11. They say no scientific evidence supports timeline shifts, but take a look at what CERN does, because every time they fire that thing up, things get a little bit weird. Some say it was a Project Bluebeam trial run. So I touched on it before. Project Bluebeam is an alleged NASA plan to simulate fake alien invasion or religious second coming using holograms. Theorists claim that 9/11 was a test of mass deception technology and social control. These theories tie in with the no planes idea, obviously the holographic projection, and of course they say there's no evidence of this. But I'd say the stuff that China and Singapore and South Korea are doing with those hologram shows is plenty evidence already. I think they've had that technology for a long time. Next, quantum weaponry experiment gone wrong. It suggests a secret physics experiment or energy beam triggered the tower's destruction, inspired by misunderstood or fringe interpretations of Tesla's research, zero-point energy, or DARPA projects. Some link it to HARP or scalar weapons, though no connection has been proven. Oh, that goes back to the hurricane and the directed energy. And finally, some say that 9/11 has been planned for centuries in advance by secret societies. Theorists claim Freemasons, Illuminati, or other ancient groups orchestrated 9/11 as a part of a long-term symbolic agenda. Alleged evidence includes dates tied to occult numerology, Eye of Providence symbols, ritual alignments with Masonic belief systems, and to go back to that classroom thing, not that that shows a long-term plan for it, but it definitely seems like a lot of people were planning accordingly for that to happen. So guys, that's the 9/11 iceberg. Let me know if I missed anything, because it's definitely possible. There's so much crazy stuff that goes into this, and I hope we get some declassifications. I'm not too confident about it because Trump's been kind of slacking with the declassifying. But again, if you want the iceberg PDF right here, check out my book club. If you head on over there, I'm going to post it in the group. I'm going to post the PDF of this iceberg, and you can have it all to yourself. And I'm going to be doing a lot of these going forward because I like this format. It's a nice way to do a breakdown of something. So I'm going to be posting the PDFs in there in that book club, and got a lot of cool things going on in there. So if you want to know more about the missing 35 trillion that I mentioned earlier, check out this episode right here. And next week, I'm going to do a deep dive on the directed energy theory of 9/11 because I think that has the most evidence behind it. And then once we get that verified, the question is who benefited the most from it? And I think I have a good feeling of what the answer is to that. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Remember to hit that subscribe button because that's very important if you enjoyed, and hit the notification bell so you can know when I put out episodes. Hit the like, do the works. Love you guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.